The tape sat by itself on a rusted filing cabinet, its label curling at the corners like skin after a bad sunburn. Puppets from hell. Someone had scrawled in what honestly looked like dried blood. The letters were wild, desperate, jagged as if the writer's hand had been shaking uncontrollably. Rachel picked it up between two fingers, like she expected it to squirm or rot away right there. She turned it over, squinting at the spools inside, as if expecting to see something moving within the plastic shell.
We never stopped looking.
She said, voice low and rough.
We just kept pushing until we found this.
Her words drifted through the silence like a warning. The whole building creaked around us, the groans echoing up through the buckled floorboards. Abandoned daycare, maybe? The walls were covered in faded, water-stained murals, Big Bird and Cookie Monster, their cartoon grins twisted by mold into something hungry and gleaming. Paint peeled from their eyes, leaving behind blank sockets that seemed to follow us. Brandon kicked an old basketball. It deflated with a sad, drawn-out hiss and rolled aside, revealing a pentagram scratched into the filthy linoleum, its lines darkened with something that could have been wax, or something worse.
Random building. My ass.
He said, giving the tape a nudge with his boot.
They wanted us to find it.
His words hung heavy, as if the shadows themselves were listening. Across the room, the ancient CRT TV gave a heavy, mechanical click, the tape slot opening like it was expecting us, its mouth yawning wide in the gloom. Static buzzed from the speakers, not normal static either. This sounded like breathing, slow and steady, almost impatient. It was as if something inside the TV was alive, waiting. Rachel slid the tape in before I could say anything, her hands steady but her knuckles white.
Only one way to know.
She muttered, jaw clenched, her eyes never leaving the flickering screen. The screen came alive, showing a twisted version of Sesame Street. Oscar's trash can was knocked over, but instead of garbage, bones spilled out, small, delicate, like from a child's hand. The bones clattered in a slow, deliberate cascade, their shadows stretching long across the painted sidewalk. Then the camera moved to Elmo. His fur wasn't red anymore. It was wet, dripping with something black that pooled at his feet and stained the floor. The blackness pulsed, as if alive, spreading out in slow, sticky veins.
Elmo knows what you did!
He giggled, his voice doubled with a choking, bubbling sound like someone drowning, a thick, gurgling noise that lingered long after he stopped speaking. The picture warped, colors bleeding at the edges. Elmo's face stretched and stretched, mouth tearing open into a long, grinning slit packed with sharp, needle teeth, each one catching the flicker of the screen.
Elmo thinks you should say sorry!
Brandon jumped for the eject button, but it snapped off in his hand, leaving behind a screw-leaking rust that looked almost like blood, the stains spreading across his palm. The TV's volume cranked up. Elmo's laugh turned into a shriek, a sound that vibrated in my bones, the speakers shaking until the glass tube inside shattered. Shards of glass rained down, pattering on the floor with a high, brittle sound. The screen went black. Then, from the busted TV, a felt hand crept out, gripping the jagged edge, its fabric torn and slick with that same black ooze. Rachel backed up, shotgun ready, but that hand wasn't alone. More puppet limbs squirmed through, crawling from the screen like spiders from a hole, their seams splitting as they dragged something bigger behind them, the stitches popping open to reveal stuffing and something darker. A head. Grover's head, blue fur-matted and sticky, his eyes rolling and wild, the whites shot through with red.
Sorry isn't enough!
He screamed, and it sounded just like kids screaming over each other, a horrible chorus that rattled the air. Elmo's hand clamped onto my wrist, strong as a bear trap. His felt fingers wriggled, alive, squirming under my skin, pressing so hard I felt my pulse stutter.
Elmo loves his new friends!
He giggled, voice thick with the gurgle of a clogged drain, every syllable wet and heavy. The world spun. He yanked us, not toward the TV, but right through it. The glass didn't shatter, it rippled, stretching like hot wax. My face pressed against it, my screams smothered by the sticky screen, the taste of static and plastic filling my mouth. Rachel shouted, but her words warped into a long, wet groan as the TV swallowed us whole. My lungs burned. The screen wasn't glass anymore. It was a throat, and it pulled us down, squeezing tighter with every inch. Then, suddenly, the pressure cut out with a gross pop, and we dropped onto a warped version of Sesame Street. The ground under my hands felt spongy, pulsing like it was alive, and each breath I took tasted like melted crayons and rot. Elmo stood over us, backlit by a flickering street lamp. His fur was falling off in strips, showing raw muscle underneath, the exposed flesh writhing as if something was moving beneath it.
Elmo thinks you should meet everyone.
He sang, voice sharp and off-key, waving a stubby, jointless arm at the shadows lurking just beyond the pool of sickly light. In the dark, dozens of eyes glinted, not animal eyes, but buttons, each one stitched tight, watching us without blinking. Rachel scrambled up. The shotgun was gone. Now she gripped a rusted fire axe that hadn't been there a second ago, her fingers bleeding where she grabbed the blade in her panic.
Brandon,
She hissed.
we're inside the tape.
That realization hit hard, a cold spike through my gut. The air stank of melted plastic and sour milk, thick enough to make my eyes water. The sky wasn't sky at all, it was just static, rolling in gray, sickening waves that crackled with every breath. Something heavy and wet hit the ground behind us. Oscar's can lay on its side, but what oozed out wasn't trash, it was tongues. Dozens of them, squirming like eels, each one tipped with a tiny, white tooth, the tips snapping blindly at the air.
Hate to break up the reunion,
Oscar rasped from somewhere in the dark, his voice scratchy and warped.
but you're late for dinner.
The tongues lashed out, wrapping around Rachel's legs before I could even shout, their grip cold and slick. She swung the axe, slicing through the mess, but the cut ends just kept growing, sprouting rows of sharp teeth and snapping hungrily at whatever they could reach. The street itself began to pulse, the sidewalk cracking open and oozing more puppet stuffing, black and rotten, as if the whole world was unraveling around us. In the sickly light, the shadows shifted and grew, revealing more puppets, faces I remembered from childhood, now twisted and wrong, their grins splitting wider as they crawled closer, button eyes gleaming like wet marbles. Elmo leaned down, his mouth stretching impossibly wide, voice echoing from everywhere at once.
Elmo thinks you should stay forever.
And behind us, the static sky rolled lower, thickening, until it began to drip down, covering everything in a slow, suffocating fog.
We have to get out of here.
Rachel gasped, her breath rattling as if she'd scraped her lungs raw. Her fingernails gouged deeper into my arm, drawing thin lines of fire along my skin, while those severed tongues, slick, mottled, and twitching, spiraled tighter around her legs. Elmo giggled, a wet, gargling noise bubbling from somewhere too deep inside him. Nothing like laughter, more like a dying animal remembering how to laugh. He lifted his stubby hands to his face, trembling with anticipation.
There's no escaping your friends.
He sang, his voice threading through the air like a nursery rhyme gone wrong, and then he hooked his thumbs into the black, gaping pits where his eyes should have been. With a sickening, rubbery pop, he wrenched the buttons out, trailing long, pink cords of sinewy goo that shimmered in the flickering light. No blood, just those terrible holes, gaping and flexing, breathing in and out. They pulsed like gills gulping at poison air. Elmo pressed the buttons into the pale felt of his palms, and right before my eyes, the black plastic sprouted tiny, needly teeth and began gnawing into his skin.
See?
He gurgled, as the button eyes dug deeper, tunneling into his hands, leaving behind twitching, lidless sockets that oozed viscous, colorless fluid. His wrist contorted and spasmed, rolling in ways wrists weren't meant to, wild and wrong, like puppet strings in a madman's hands.
Now Elmo really sees you.
Rachel puked, doubling over as the stench, acid mixed with sour milk and something rotten, filled the air, thick and suffocating. Oscar's tongues yanked at her ankles, dragging her inch by inch toward the overturned trash can, its mouth opening and closing, pulsing like a living throat. I swung the axe, fury and terror fueling my arms, hacking through two tongues with a wet snap, but as soon as they fell away, replacements sprouted from the darkness, wriggling and sparking like live wires, the scent of ozone crackling in the air. Elmo's wrist eyes fixed on me, their glossy, twitching surfaces swirling with colors that didn't belong. His head lolled sideways too far, the neck stretching with a wet, tearing sound, his smile splitting the felt.
Brandon!
he crooned, but Ash's desperate, ragged screams warped his voice, layering terror on top of mockery.
Why fight? You missed them!
You missed them. The static sky flickered overhead, and in that single, electric heartbeat I saw our friends, Mark, a shadow thrashing behind glass, mouth open in a silent scream, Corey's severed arm twitching in a vat of pink sludge, fingers jerking helplessly. The images seared themselves into my mind, scarring the inside of my skull, impossible to scrape away. Rachel howled, a choked, broken sound. Not from pain, from something deeper, something that clawed at the soul. Her axe clattered to the pavement as she clutched her head, nails raking into her scalp.
They're in me.
She choked out, voice barely more than a whisper. Beneath her skin, tiny film reels slithered and twisted, pushing and writhing, and Ash's face rippled across her forearm in broken, stuttering frames, mouth opening and closing in silent agony. Elmo smashed his eye-palmed hands together, the wet slap echoing, sticky and obscene.
This sick and twisted puppet show ends now.
I snarled, my voice shaking, the flamethrower's tank digging into my back, heavy as guilt and twice as cold. Rachel's arm jerked beside me, still flickering, Corey's severed fingers spasming just below the skin, spelling out help us across her flesh like a warped, living tattoo. The air itself seemed to warp and shudder, thick with the greasy stench of burning felt, melting polyester, and rotten stuffing, like a daycare set ablaze, innocence turned to ash. Elmo's wrist eyes spun wildly as I thumbed the ignition.
Elmo thinks fire is naughty!
He giggled, a high, skipping sound, right as a stream of blue flame spat from the nozzle and licked across his fur. His scream was inhuman, 100 VHS tapes rewinding all at once, screeching, his stitches bursting, popping like greasy popcorn. He didn't stop laughing, not even as his face sloughed off in globs, melting down his chest, dripping onto Oscar's writhing tongues. Rachel wrenched herself free, boots kicking at the tongues, hacking and stomping just as the ground heaved under us. The entire Sesame Street set lurched and bucked, the painted brownstone facades splitting open to reveal red, pulsing walls that shrank from the advancing flames, shuddering like muscle recoiling from a hot blade.
Brandon.
Rachel screamed, and in her hands, the flamethrower roared, spitting fire.
The sky, look.
I looked up. It wasn't sky, had never been sky. It was endless film, reels and reels of it unspooling overhead, the celluloid burning at the edges where my flames licked too high. Ash's face flickered in and out, mouthing pull the plug, her lips melting as the projection warped and twisted, the world shuddering with every frame. Then Elmo's charred hand shot out from the inferno, fingers fused into claws, and clamped around my ankle. His voice poured from everywhere, the sewers, the burning brownstones, from inside Oscar's ken, even from the crawling things beneath Rachel's skin.
Elmo hates when friends leave early!
The flames swallowed his face again, fire hissing as it met felt and glue, and the world flipped inside out. Rachel's scream stretched, warped and wet, echoing into infinity. Above us, the sky peeled back like burning film, the reels snapping, celluloid curling and shrinking away from the heat. Then, a gunshot pop, a sharp, shattering sound, and suddenly we crashed down onto cracked linoleum, coughing, retching, our mouths filled with the taste of burnt plastic and puppet stuffing. Behind us, the old CRT TV exploded, glass shards spraying the daycare walls, the echo of its destruction hanging in the air. From the wreckage, one last, broken shriek spiraled out, not Elmo, but something deeper, vaster, hungrier. Then the tape melted, bubbling into black sludge that hissed and slithered away down cracks in the floor. Rachel rolled onto her back, chest heaving, struggling to suck in air. Her forearms still flickered, images of ash quivering under her skin, the celluloid squirming like a nest of worms trapped beneath glass.
It's not over.
She rasped, eyes wide and wild, staring up at the ceiling where water-stained big bird murals leered down with cracked, painted smiles.
They're still inside us. I can feel them moving.
The building groaned around us. It wasn't the creak of old beams or settling wood, but a deep, wet, animal sound, like something digesting its meal, bones and all. Beneath us, the pentagram scratched into the linoleum glowed a dull, angry red, pulsing in time with the thing's breath. I wiped puppet gunk from my face.
Then we cut them out.
I said, my words shaking with certainty and terror. I grabbed the fire axe from Oscar's twitching tongues, still writhing, reaching for my ankles, and before Rachel could protest, brought the blade down on her flickering arm, determined to carve away the nightmare, even if it meant losing everything. The axe stopped a hair from her skin. Not because Brandon had second thoughts. Something else blocked it. Under Rachel's flesh, those weird celluloid strands twisted and shifted, flexing like living wires, and suddenly Ash's mouth pressed up from inside, stretching the skin, open in a silent scream.
Don't!
It was Ash's voice, unmistakable in its urgency, but the eyes were wrong, black, round, like buttons sewn on by trembling hands. Rachel jerked back, the shock ricocheting through her nerves. Brandon just tightened his grip, knuckles white.
Hold still.
The floor exploded beneath us. It didn't just break, it ruptured, split wide open, floorboards peeling back like rotten fruit, exposing a writhing pit full of what felt and snapping, jagged teeth. Rachel clamped onto my wrist, her fingers sticky and slick with blood, her grip desperate. The axe slipped from my hand, spinning once before vanishing into the churning pit below. Oscar's tongue shot up, grotesque and slick, wrapping my waist with terrifying speed, barbed and tight as chains, the pressure intense enough to bruise. A key blast ripped through Elmo's chest, blue light arcing, burning and eating away at him, not just scorching, but unraveling the very fabric of his being. His stitches popped, puppet skin crumbling into gray ash, drifting like snow. Those horrible wrist eyes rolled back, the black button sagging, melting into viscous sludge as he shrieked, like 100 old VHS tapes all rewinding at once, that awful, grinding sound filling the air. I didn't wait to watch him fall. I grabbed Rachel, locked my arms tight around her, and kicked off the cracking, splintered floor, blasting us up through a sky that wasn't sky at all, just endless static. The heavens split open above, film strips tearing, flickering with quick, silent images of our friends' faces, Corey, Jamie, even Ash, each image gone in an instant as we shot through. It sounded like a gun going off, the crack echoing through the static void. Cold air slammed into us, a rush of actual air, sharp and pure, not the melted plastic stench that clung to our clothes from below. We crashed onto the daycare's linoleum, sliding through broken glass and the remains of the busted-up old TV. Rachel coughed, her arm twitching, Ash's voice still stuttering under her skin, like a damaged recording.
Did we?
Her hand pressed to her bleeding side, eyes wide with disbelief. The TV answered. Its ruined VHS tape jerked and writhed, celluloid strips squirming like headless worms desperate to escape. With a sickening pop, Elmo's half-burned hand clawed out, fingers dragging themselves toward us with a mindless persistence. Rachel's shotgun was lost to the tape's nightmare logic, swallowed somewhere in the chaos. But I felt key crackling at my fingertips, a shaky, last little spark of energy left. One shot. That was all. I let it fly. The blast hit dead on, slicing Elmo's wrist clean off in a burst of blue fire, the energy so bright it etched after images on my retinas. The severed hand landed, twitching and spasming. Rachel stomped it, crunch, grinding the felt into the pentagram painted on the floor. The red glow flared, once, violently, then faded. For a second, nothing but the sound of our breaths. It didn't last. Rachel's breath caught in her throat, the celluloid in her arm writhing, Ash's face fighting to split through her skin, the features flickering beneath like a trapped ghost. I reached for her, but the whole place shuddered, the air vibrating with something ancient and patient. A water-stained big bird mural cracked wide open, the yellow beak tearing, spewing reels of film that slithered out in oily, shimmering coils. Rachel screamed, but it wasn't a human sound, more like the tearing of film, Ash's face flickering in frames across her skin, caught in a projector's jam, the images stuttering and overlapping. The reels from Big Bird's mouth weren't just film, they were alive, twisting into barbed wire, snapping through the air, whipping at Brandon's throat. He ducked, feeling razor-sharp frames graze his neck, leaving thin, black bleeding cuts that dripped down his collar. Rachel gasped for air, clutching her arm as the celluloid writhed under her skin, slick and serpentine, moving with an intelligence all its own. The daycare pulsed, not with life, but with something older, something that had waited beneath layers of paint and laughter for a long, long time. Black sludge oozed from the smashed TV, pooling on the floor, but the real nightmare crawled across the walls. The painted eyes on the murals blinked, slow and deliberate, following us as we stumbled for the exit, their gaze heavy and impossible to shake. Brandon's key flickered out, his fingertips smoking, the last of his energy spent.
We're not done.
He muttered, voice hoarse, watching the film reel twitch and spasm on the floor. One unspooled fast, flashing images of Corey's severed arm, signing help us over and over in a broken loop, each frame more desperate than the last. Rachel kicked it away, but the film stuck to her boot, curling around her laces like it wanted to burrow inside. The exit was right there, maybe 10 feet away, a narrow rectangle of hope. It felt a lot farther. The floor creaked, not from our steps, but as if it were waiting, tensed with anticipation. Something underneath breathed, a deep, slow exhalation that rattled the glass and the frames. Then, total darkness. No flicker, no warning, just sudden, absolute blackness. The lights snapped off, as if a master switch had been flipped somewhere deep inside the building. The dark pressed in, thick as blood, suffocating. Rachel's arm glowed, Ash's face screaming in flickers beneath her skin, desperate to get out. Then came the boom. Not a sound, but the absence of it, a vacuum so deep my ears imploded before the shockwave even hit. The daycare walls didn't just fall, they folded away, peeling back strip by strip. Plaster, rebar, paint, all of it gone, torn away in silence. No sky outside. Just static, endless and glitching, stretching out in every direction. Waiting for us. Rachel's mouth pressed against my shoulder.
Brandon.
But her voice lagged behind, distorted and out of sync, like a bad dub on TV from some other country. Then everything flipped upside down, the world rolling over itself in a dizzying spiral. My spine crunched, vertebrae grinding together as we spun through collapsing walls that folded like cardboard. And behind us, Elmo's half-burned hand reached up, twitching in the smoky air, fingers flashing gotcha in ASL one last time. For a split second, the gesture hung suspended, stubborn and defiant, right before the shockwave melted it away, leaving only a memory behind. When we hit the ground, the concrete scraped my tongue, tasting weirdly sweet, almost like burnt sugar left too long on the stove, an odd comfort in the middle of chaos. My ribs popped, loud and sudden, each crack echoing like a VCR spitting out an old tape, the sound both familiar and deeply unsettling. Rachel rolled off me, pushing herself up with shaking arms, her breath ragged. She coughed, but instead of blood, something else came out, actual film strips, black and glossy, wet and wriggling, squirming between her fingers and staining the dirt. They clung to her hand before she flung them away, where they curled and steamed on the ground, dissolving into the debris. Above us, a busted neon sign flickered in the dust-choked air, Project PUPPT authorized personnel only. The O in only blinked on and off, slow and tired, like an eye too exhausted to stay open, casting broken shadows over the rubble. The sign buzzed and spat sparks, threatening to give out at any moment, but somehow it kept going, its message half warning, half invitation. Brendan still can't shake the question gnawing at the back of his mind. Where did these powers even come from? Is it just some cosmic joke keeping him alive, the universe's idea of a punchline, or is there something deeper at play, some hidden logic behind the chaos? He doesn't have answers yet, not even close, but he knows one thing for certain. Whatever this is, their story isn't finished. The threads are still tangled, the reel's still spinning. Not even close.